Alright, here we go. Sorry if my fan in the background. You might not be able to hear it at all. But you might be able to hear it really well. I don't know. You can definitely hear it. Might go as screen capture too. Oh, it's the music on Worldbox. Alright, let's go.
I train law enforcement and the military in interrogation and body language. I'm Scott Rouse. I'm a body language expert and analyst, and I train law enforcement and the military in interrogation and body language. And I created the #1 online body language course, Body Language.
And Darrell Brooks is a piece of work. He drove his car through a Christmas parade, but he decided to represent himself in court. So if you haven't seen that trial, I'm gonna recommend a channel. It's called This Family Does Everything. So pretty easy to remember. This Family Does Everything. And they made compilations of Darrell Brooks and his trial. And so it's just him. And oh my god, it is just chock full of Schadenfreude. If you like to see people who think that they're amazing and think that they're just God's gift to the world when it comes to intelligence and just knowing more than everybody. Darrell Brooks, God, he's so dumb, but he thinks he's so special. And it's just so absurd that it's entertaining to watch.
Tactics.com with Greg Hartley. Mark?
Mark Bowden, I'm an expert in human behavior and body language, help people all over the world to stand out, win trust and gain credibility every time they communicate, including some of the leaders of the G7. Chase.
Hey, I'm Chase Hughes, did 20 years in the U.S. military, wrote the #1 best-selling book on influence, persuasion, and behavior profiling. I teach that to intelligence agencies and the general public today. Greg?
Greg Hartley. I'm a former Army interrogator, interrogation instructor, resistance interrogation instructor. I've written 10 books on body language and behavior, put together the #1 bodylanguagetactics.com course with Scott Rouse, and I spend my time in business.
All right, today we're going to talk about Darrell Brooks. And there's so much information that comes with him. I'm not going to talk much. Greg, why don't you tell us about him?
Yeah, so let's just cut to the chase. The most important part is that he is called the Waukesha Christmas Parade, whatever they call him, killer. But he drove through a crowd, was convicted of driving through that crowd, and I think he just received a very harsh sentence, I think life in prison. This interrogation is hours after the act occurred. This interrogation went on for 5 hours.
Okay, yeah.
Brooks had a history of mental illness, including starting at 11 years old. He was diagnosed as bipolar. At 12, he was put into a mental hospital and had a lot of violent run-ins with the law over time around assault of all kinds. Go and look his record up. He's got a long rap sheet.
Okay. I know you've heard it before, so you kind of understand that. Yes, sir. Okay. Do you have any questions before I start for me?
I missed
The only thing I want to know is
that he is called the Waukesha Christmas Parade, whatever they call him, killer. But he drove through a crowd, was convicted of driving through that crowd, and I think he just received a very harsh sentence, I think life in prison. This interrogation is hours after the act occurred. This interrogation went on for 5 hours. Brooks had a history of mental illness, including starting at 11 years old. He was diagnosed as bipolar. At 12, he was put into a mental hospital and had a lot of violent run-ins with the law over time around assault of all kinds. Go and look his record up. He's got a long rap sheet.
okay. I know you've heard it before, so you kind of understand that. Yes, sir. Okay. Do you have any questions before I start for me? The only thing I want to know is
this interrogation is infuriating. He gets so offended. At one point, he's like, "You lied to me, man. You lied to me." Because the FBI guys were there. And they're just like, "Yeah, they're just here helping us out." And he finds out that they're actually looking into what he knows that he did. He's like, "Y'all lied to me, man." It's like, what the fuck? Who do you think you are? Like, he's like sincerely hurt. No, I'm sorry I cussed.
In the head, am I being charged with anything?
Well, she's making some, like I said, alleged allegations against you, kind of, for being physical. So that's what, if that's BS, that's what I'm looking to hear from you. Okay?
Total BS.
You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of, we couldn't track her down, so that's kind of where we're at. It's this typical back and forth stuff that guys like you go through with their baby mama all the time. And they're all, there's a lot of guys out there in your spot, and a lot of times, maybe it's not always fair to them, but that's kind of what
I
I'm
wish
trying
they
to
had a
figure out.
law to where people can, if you do that, you should get in trouble.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, why?
And he's so offended. The detectives are in there talking to him about his baby mama, saying that she made some comments that he abused her, and so he's acting all offended, like, "What? That's ridiculous. I would never." When yes, he would, and he would run her over with the car also. But he's so offended about that, knowing that he's in here for intentionally running over 30-something people, killing 8, injuring 30-something, severely injuring them, like compound broken femurs and things like that. He wasn't just like, "Oh, I just drove through a group." He drove through a group and another group and another group and another group as he's accelerating, going 35 miles an hour. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it is very fast. 3 times as fast as Usain Bolt can run in a almost 2-ton vehicle. That's gonna cause a lot of damage, and here he is being offended. "I can't believe Erica said this stuff. They should be punished for this."
You shouldn't be able to just be like, "Oh, I'm pissed off, so I'm gonna call and do this."
Yep. I agree.
Like, why would you put me in that situation and then we're gonna end up being together anyway? Why would you do that?
Trying to judge that credibility. Yeah, and that's total BS. So that's what that's why we're sitting in here with you, to try to sift through the BS, if that's what we got, and go from there.
Crazy, man.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, this is actually going to be one of my favorites we've done in a while, because this is a really good example of how interrogation really works. And we're going to see him starting right off. Both people have something to gain. Both people are trying to get information. This guy right out of the gate starts off with some guilty knowledge. What am I being charged with? He knows this is not about the girlfriend. He thinks it's about something else, but he's trying to figure it out. Is he trying to figure out how many people died? What's he trying to figure out? We can't tell, but he's smart. He's street savvy. He's probably had same kind of interaction with the police before. Watch him as he talks through this. He's trying to be helpful. He's trying to be friendly. He's fishing. He's trying to get information. His browser up and his illustrators are in time with his message. His adapters are there as his leg starts balancing. And this mask is actually helping him. If you don't believe that, when he has a stressful moment, he'll push that mask up. This interrogator is the kind that I refer to as concentric circles interrogation, meaning his questioning is going to get progressively tighter and progressively tighter and progressively tighter until he gets what he wants. Dora Vasquez-Hellner, one of my favorite Army interrogators that I did a show called We Can Make You Talk for History Channel with, is very much this kind of interrogation approach. She can break people with just questions, and a good questioner can do that. This is a first step. He's trying to put this guy at the scene. This feels like an interrogation. You can feel a glass wall between the two people as one's trying to get information from the other and the other's trying to get information from him at the same time. That's often how it goes. And then you see exaggerated
him exaggerate his movement as he steps into his first ploy. Because what this guy's trying to do is say you were with your girlfriend and she was here. He's trying to put him at the scene. So good start. Scott, what do you got?
All right, I agree with you. He's doing recon at the top. He's trying to find out. That's why throughout this he'll be saying, "What am I being charged with? What's going on here? What's happening?" Because he's just waiting for that thing for the other shoe to drop. And they're using this, just like you said, to make sure they can prove he was there. As we go through this, one of the things to pay attention to are his illustrators. I'm all the time talking about illustrators because they're important. Those are the things we use of your hands, your head, your eyebrows to emphasize specific words or phrases. As we go through this, we'll watch them get really big and we'll watch them get really small. And we'll watch him end up in spots they shouldn't when he uses his illustrators. Instead of doing this, he'll do this. And they'll be happening when there are no words. But we'll talk about that as we go along. As we go through this, we'll also see his voice becomes animated. It's going at a pretty good clip, and it's really loud. And he's much louder than the interrogator. So let's listen for it to go up and down as we go through this, because we'll be able to gauge the amount of stress he's under. That's one of the things we'll be able to use to have a better understanding of what kind of stress he's under. And even though he's trying to show he's worried about this domestic violence situation, he knows that the other thing is coming. It has to be. I mean, he's hoping it isn't, but it has to be. That's why he commits so hard to this a domestic violence thing and acts like it's such a horrible thing. It's so hard. It is horrible. Domestic violence is horrible, but he goes a little bit too far with it, trying to make it a really big deal as in comparison to what he's in trouble for that he's really going to talk to him about. So let's pay attention to everything from his hands to his head to his mouth. It's covered most of the time, but you'll see when he pulls his mask off. Let's pay attention to all that stuff as we go through, because all of it's going to start changing as we move along. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people have asked for this, not only because of the current nature of it, but also they've gone, hey, this guy's got a mask on and the camera angle is at a certain angle. And what do you do when you can't see the face so well? Well, we can always see all kinds of little elements in there, and you're going to see us all pick up on that. But this is a great opportunity for me to go, okay, so I just won't look at the face at all. I'm going to focus completely on what his hands are doing and what the bigger kind of what I would call the gross body is doing. That's not because all of us can't pick up things that are happening in the face, but I thought it'd be interesting to kind of thin slice stuff even thinner. What information can you get from a really thin slice? Now, there's a risk in this, which is the slice is too thin, and I would never say, hey, make the slice really thin, but what a great opportunity just to narrow it down. So let me narrow it down for you. Really tight elbows in there that we can see. Okay, so we can see that he's already protecting this ventral area, vulnerable area here. So under some stress there, we can see anxiety in the leg. You'll see his hand bob up and down. That's because the leg is moving. Could be drugs that he could be taking at the time.
Ventral and dorsal. I believe dorsal is outer, ventral is kind of inner. So if you are injured on your dorsal side, then that's normal. If you're injured on the ventral side, that's abnormal. Could be signs of abuse, I think. What are ventral and dorsal in terms of in areas on the body? Ventral abdomen. Ventral is the front, dorsal is the back. Back, butt, shoulder blades, ventral, chest, stomach, face. So kind of what I thought, but not really. Dorsal is the back, ventral is the front.
Though it's not really continual, so I'm going to say there's elements that are talked about that you get this little kind of leg jiggle that amplifies in the hand, so a moment of stress there. Got this head wobble that goes on there. Seems very indirect. I think that's because he's trying to work out, like, which crime are you going for? at the moment. So he's trying to assess the situation. He reels back on that accusation, but it seems like it's a bit too pronounced, that reel back. I think it might be even surprised as to which accusation is coming at him just then. And then we get the head to the hands, the hand to the forehead here, it looks like, but I think it's a full eye block there, as he also submits to gravity. The whole body goes down. So straight off the bat, looking at the whole body here and kind of ignoring what we could see in the eyes or the face, I see somebody already confused slightly, looking for what's going on and under stress already. But Chase, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, so I'm going to break down the interrogator for a minute. And one thing I'm going to do, what Greg told you a second ago, this is a great interrogation. We're witnessing some awesome stuff. I'm going to give you some things that could have been different, not could have been better per se, but in my opinion, some of the things that could have been different, some things that went well. The first thing is the seating arrangement. The seating arrangement should almost never be done this way. Ideally, the rule of thumb is you want no more than a corner of the table in between you. So if anything, that's what you want. And as an example, the interrogation of this kid who was a shooter named Nicholas Cruz had a great arrangement where the interrogator and the suspect were both on the same side of the table. They were together on the same side. So when he confirms that it's BS, we see a postural retreat. We see almost a 2 o'clock eye accessing movement, confirmation glance to the other interviewer. There's some rapid left and right eye movement there. There's some facial touching with this mask thing that you, Scott, you were talking about. There's a rapid increase and difference from his otherwise predictable behavior. And what we see here that Mark was just talking about, the elbows coming in, this is, I call elbow retraction. When our bodies are doing stuff that's fear-based, you'll see the skeleton protect arteries, skeleton protecting arteries. So this elbows move in and we're protecting this artery right here called the brachial. And, you know, we see somebody get the crap scared out of them on YouTube. Their shoulders go up like this, their arms come in. So our body automatically starts protecting these arteries. And that's kind of one of the things we're going to see here, and we're going to see that again. So I think there's a high likelihood that there is something off here and should be maybe asking some more questions, which we'll get into. And when he says a lot of guys out there are in your spot, he's emphasizing the commonality of a situation to reduce the stress. And this is, in interrogation, is called socializing. We call that socializing. I watched this video first with no idea what's coming next. So my notes here contain essentially a behavioral profile that we can use later. He's socially intelligent, makes eye contact with both interviewers at key moments where he desires agreement from them, comfortable using profanity while still showing respect to them, has a semi-fearful demeanor. His hands were kept under the table almost the whole time, showed discomfort when moving toward the other interviewers, and when placing his hands on the table, which belongs to the interviewers. So let's just take that quick behavioral baseline and go from here.
Okay? And I know you've heard it before, so you understand it. So, okay. Do you have any questions before I start for me?
Only thing I want to know is, what in the heck, am I being charged with anything?
Well, she's making some, like I said, alleged allegations against you, kind of, you know, for being physical. So that's what, you know, if that's BS, that's what I'm looking to hear from you. Okay?
Total BS.
You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of, we couldn't track her down, so that's kind of where we're at. It's this typical back and forth stuff that guys like you go through with their baby mama all the time. And they're all, you know, there's a lot of guys out there in your spot, you know. And a lot of times, you know, maybe it's not always fair to them, but that's kind of what
I
I'm
wish they had a law to where people can, if you do that, you should get in trouble.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, why? You shouldn't be able to just be like, oh, I'm pissed off, so I'm going to call and do this.
Yep. I agree.
Like, why would you put me in that situation and then you know we're going to end up being together anyway?
That's
Why would you do that?
Trying to judge that credibility.
Yeah, and that's total BS. So that's what that's why we're sitting in here with you to try to sift through the BS if that's what we got, and go from there.
Crazy, man.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
No.
What brought you to Waukesha yesterday? How did you get out here?
I was meeting up with a friend to watch the Packer game.
Okay.
That's the only reason why I was out here.
Where did you go to watch the game?
To a friend named Stephanie.
Her house, a bar, or?
A house.
And I don't mean to make you uncomfortable or anything, but what's the address there? What street
I
is it
have
on?
no idea about Waukesha. I don't know the streets.
What was it near? I know you had to see something near it. So what was it near?
Like a gas station?
Have you been to the house before?
No.
Never before?
No.
What's Stephanie's last name?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
When did you guys set this up?
Maybe a couple days ago.
Okay.
Like I said, I have a few friends. I have a few friends in Milwaukee that have people out here, so
Okay.
it's not, I don't, like I said last night, I don't know the streets in Waukesha. It's not where I usually hang out at, so I couldn't say, well, this street, and this, you know, I couldn't.
All right.
Stephanie, like a friend of yours or like a friend of a friend?
A friend of a friend, mutual friend.
And what did you
She's
say her
just
last
like-
name was?
I have no idea.
How long have you known her?
That was my first time meeting her.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so we're getting a lot of what I would call supplicant palms. So these palms of, you know, hey, give me a break or hand me something. Some palms that could kind of hold something up. But I can see from above we're getting a lot of double shoulder shrug as well. Kind of like, hey, you know, what can you do? And he puts that together with, I have no idea. In fact, he's got straight palms down here. I got no idea. I think with him, what we get is when he knows he needs to lie, he becomes way more direct. There's way more line of energy in there when he knows this is a lie that I need to tell. Otherwise, when he's still lying, but when it's not so important, he's just more erratic, more staccato. And that, if it were any other situation from this might be that you kind of didn't know that he's lying most of the time or being deceptive most of the time, could be a bit of a problem, because usually you'd expect these strong lines of energy to be honest. Usually you might expect, you know, these supplicant gestures and this gesture of, hey, what are you going to do, to be more honest. The difference here is the change in energy. The change in how dramatic he is, how indirect he is when he's kind of unpurposefully lying, and how direct and energetic he is when he knows he needs to win this lie. So look at the difference here between staccato and indirect, and when he's more direct and more energized. That for me is a deviation from baseline, and therefore for me says we should pay more attention to what he's saying in these more energized, direct areas. I think what I take from this particular excerpt is he thinks his tactic of I have no idea is going to work for him. He's quite pleased with that tactic, and we see him play it a couple of times in this one, and I think we're going to see it further down the line as well. Greg, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, so I get questions all the time about what does resistance to interrogation mean? The best possible resistance training is inoculation. By that, I mean the more times you're exposed, the less likely you are to fall for it. This guy's been exposed, and I can see it in the way he's responding. Interestingly, he came with information prepared. You can tell he's emphatic when he's prepared. Boom, 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 boom. But he only iteratively releases information as he's asked a question. So when you ask him, a friend, boom, there are short sentences. When he's not prepared to answer, like, did you know her name? No, I didn't know her name. Too much information, more words. That shows you, and you can see the difference. He stammers when he's doing that instead of delivering with quick dropped information. My favorite thing, and I talk about this all the time with people, Scott, you talk about timing of illustrators. I talk about out of frame illustrators. The fish was that big Well, people don't do that. They hold their hands in front of them when they're talking. Maybe he has an anomaly? Not likely, because we'll see him using his hands other times in front of him. But when he's talking about his friend, his hands are out of frame. He does that head bobble thing again, which is neither a yes or a no. I think anytime you see this guy poorly planned, you're going to see him stammer and move around, and you'll see him close up. Now, this thing where you're talking about elbows to the side, Chase, I take another approach, similar, but another approach. I say we're the only mammal that walks around with our soft white underbelly unprotected. So when something happens, as importantly as those arteries, there's a liver and a whole bunch of stuff that a sword would cut through or a stick would gouge, and people make an exoskeleton. Got a great example of that in my theater history, where a guy panicked and stuck his head up and got cracked in the head with a sword. So when people are feeling that stress, they're going to do something. And he closes his elbows to his side, holds his hands up like, what can I do? And shrinks his head in. The only difference is his elbows are locked when he does it, so it looks really weird. I kind of think I could put a name to that and call it Franken-turtling. But whatever he's doing, he's turtling, what we would call shrinking your head and making your space much smaller. And then he does a request for approval. Hard to see a lot of facial expression, that raising my brow when I'm asking you to believe something. And I have no idea of her last name, and I just put, that's because she ain't got one. He didn't make it up. There's congruent messaging. You want to know what his normal messaging looks like? He goes back to say, I don't know the streets here. That's his normal. So we got a baseline for talking about something he has no reason to lie about, and we see him iteratively releasing information and then exploding to try to justify. Love the nervous laugh when he has to justify something. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, so as from a baseline perspective, if we can do that with this video, since it's full of crazy stuff, he's accessing apparently genuine geography at around 11 o'clock when he's saying something. So I would assume that there's some genuineness to that. And he mentions his friend, and he motions all the way to his right with both hands. So make a mental note of that. He motioned to his right side with both hands. Make a note of that. One other thing to take note of here is how rapidly he shifts between the interviewers when they ask questions. And this is called threat locking. This is like I hear a tiny peep out of one person and I rapidly move my eyes and head to that where that sound came from. So when someone rapidly moves their eyes or their body to adjust in a social situation, it indicates a higher than normal level of stress. Most of the time that you're going to see this in your life is when someone's experiencing social anxiety. You'll see these rapid movements at a party or a networking, especially at a networking event. But occasionally you'll see it during deception, which I think we're seeing here. The stress goes up and he has to lock on instantaneously to what those people are saying because they are a potential threat. But they've presented themselves as good interrogators, as a source of value and protection. So they represent both sides of threat and rescuer at the same time, which any good interrogator should be. Scott?
All right. When the interviewer says or asks him, how did you get here? His arm covers his stomach and it freezes there. And this is a barrier. Again, protecting himself as well. I'm sure his limbic system is just going wild, on, off, then on and staying on. It's got to be a very stressful for him, and we see that on him. Now, when we focus on his illustrators, this entire interview is a fantastic study of how illustrators are supposed to lock up with the words you're saying, but they don't. And that's because he's got cognitive dissonance going on. He's got so many things. He's structuring his story and hoping it's matching up with what he said before. He's got to remember what all he said, make sure everything's still laying in place, and he has to lay anything else in there. Then it has to work with that because the interrogator's doing a great job. He'll ask him things that would happen way in the future and sort of work his way back a little bit, which is beautiful, him doing this, because then he has to think stuff up and then lay it in there. So he's really watching his words and watching how he talks to make sure that he has the right puzzle parts to put in this puzzle that's going to be a story. Now, quite often, but not every time, when someone is speaking and their illustrators don't land where they're supposed to, that suggests that they're being dishonest. That suggests they're being deceptive. And here we're seeing it writ large. Now, Albert Bray is a body language, I guess you'd almost call him a scientist at this point. And from his studies, we found out that the person who is being honest is more likely to use more illustrators. And the person who's being deceptive uses less illustrators. But we're seeing him go nuts on this one because he's overdoing it. He's overplaying He knows he has to make these statements and make them stick, or he wants to, so they're too big. And you guys are referring to his open hands like this. I refer to that as mercy hands, because, oh God, please believe me, please believe what I'm saying. And it's not like this, it's not like this, but it's like this, and the palms are forward a little bit like that. So that's when you see that, that usually tells me, or that's when I always keep focusing on, see how many times it pops up. That says that, for me, that's a deceptive cue. I don't know if I would count on it every time, but it sure pops up a lot around those situations. Another thing about illustrators, I'm going to focus on those during this whole thing. We know this guy's lying. We already know he's lying. So it's a great study to see how these things, when they don't land when they're supposed to, how we can look at his illustrators, and we already know, we understand the veracity of them, because they're not worth anything, because he's making this stuff up as he goes along, some of it, and making sure, like I said before, all the puzzle pieces match. So keep paying attention to his illustrators, how he's using them, and when he starts, like Greg was saying earlier, they go to one side and they're way out of frame when he does those. It's so important, because these are being overdone and they're too big. And when you see someone doing that, it doesn't mean they're lying to you, doesn't mean they're telling you the truth, but you'll get that little feeling in there that tells you something's just not right, and you'll get that feeling, as you probably already have, watching this. So remember that feeling you've got. If you see it again, don't say, oh, I know they're lying because I feel that way, but continue to look for other things, the other things we talk to you about and teach you, so you can start making a correct decision for yourself.
No. What brought you to Waukesha yesterday? How did you get out here?
I was meeting up with a friend to watch the Packer game.
Okay.
That's the only reason why I was out here.
Where did you go to watch the game?
To a friend named Stephanie.
Her house, a bar, or?
A house.
And I don't mean to make you uncomfortable or anything, but what's the address there? What's she
I
on
have
it?
no idea about Waukesha. I don't know the streets.
What was it near? I know you had to see something near it. So what was it near?
Like a gas station?
Have you been to the house before?
No.
Never before?
No.
What's Stephanie's last name?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
When did you guys set this up?
Maybe a couple of days ago.
Okay.
Like I said, I have a few friends. I have a few friends in Milwaukee that have people out here, so
Okay.
it's not, like I said last night, I don't know the streets in Waukesha. It's not where I usually hang out at, so I couldn't say, well, this street, and this, I couldn't.
All right.
Stephanie, like a friend of yours or like a friend of a friend?
A friend of a friend, mutual friend.
And what did you say
She was
her
just
last
like,
name was?
I have no idea.
How long have you known her?
That was my first time meeting her. So,
How did you get the number to know the house to go to?
a friend.
So how did you get to her house?
My friend. I went with my friend.
Okay, who's that?
My friend, I don't really want to say his name. I don't know if that's going to incriminate him in anything. So.
Okay, so let's go with this. How did you come? I know you saw Erica yesterday in Waukesha because we talked to her. Now I don't know everything that went on, and I'm not saying I believe everything she told the other officers. How did you come to meet with her in Waukesha? One, and two. You say you don't know Waukesha, but where did you meet her? A gas station, a park? I know you met her. Where did you meet her? What happened yesterday?
Yeah,
So, because if this is BS, like you say, and I know you met her, what happened?
I
So
met
what
her
happened when you met her? Where did you meet her? Let's start with that.
by a gas station.
Okay.
I don't know what I was supposed to be getting some money from her.
Okay. For what?
It was the rest of my money that
There was a
she had
massive
of mine
chicken.
that she was holding for me.
Yes, right there.
Okay, how much?
Look at
It was
it's
supposed
a
to be
giant. Yeah, it's a
$350.
Yes.
Okay. And
All right, Chase, what do you got?
Amazing. Let's make
A few
it
videos ago, I said that this guy was socially intelligent. And I say this because there's a reason he represented himself in court. Either he's a moron, or he has probably won every argument with anybody he's ever tried to argue with in his life, which gave him artificial confidence that he could do this.
Dude,
And
I got that in my notes too.
I don't think he's a moron. I really don't. He's a POS, but definitely not a moron. We're still seeing this right side reference to describe things, and keep a note of that. When he speaks about the money she's holding for him, there's a very, very clear gesture to his left using both hands, complete opposite side. And it's out of frame gesture like Greg was just teaching you about, which means based on the way he usually speaks, there's a drop in the ability to formulate or produce sentences, and this is called a loss of fluency. So his fluency also drops at that exact point. He becomes less fluent. After this gesture, he pulls his hands into his stomach. This is in this weird way. And this kind of seems unusual, probably to you too, and this may not be deception, but it's definitely a place where elicitation and more questioning would need a very sharp increase. And right at this $350 moment, there's more deviation here. There's upward tone, fading facts, which you might hear from Scott all about. Maybe Scott will tell us about that. There's hesitancy. There's distancing language where he said, and then supposed to be. And as an interrogation note, legal pads and pens are typically a bad idea in an interrogation room. The more permanent the notes you're taking appear to the other person, the more official and permanent, those two words. You want your notes to be unofficial and non-permanent, which means small scrap of paper that you tore in half and using a pencil makes it appear less formal and less permanent. And it's easier to take notes while the person's talking because they don't feel like it's being permanently inscribed on something that's official. That's all I got for this one. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so let's talk about interrogation. Those are good pointers, I think, but let's talk about interrogation and the differences. If you're doing a full-blown intelligence interrogation, it's really normal to have some kind of record keeping. The other thing to use it for is a prop. I might leave this there for you to get, feeling like you have some power when you tear it up as I come back in and go, yeah, that's all recorded. Hope you had a good time. But yeah, now you just incriminated yourself. So there's a lot of reasons you might use it and other reasons you might not. So, and I think Chase's point there is a very good one. They're more liable to say something if they don't think you're writing it down, and that's important. But if you're doing a long, drawn-out interrogation, sometimes you'll see these guys do it. So just give them a pass in that. Here's an interesting one for you. He leans back and exposes his throat. Now, we always tell you that people often will close up and cover their throat when they're feeling threatened. This is where culture matters. Culture really matters here. Because if he lives in a culture where that means, nope, I'm being defiant, and he's throwing his chin up, then that becomes part of it. So you got to pay attention and say, you can lie with your chin up. It's just not as common. When you see a false confession, often in interrogation, you'll see a guy with his chin up confessing. And we're going to talk about confession dynamics as we get closer to the end of this, because there's a couple places where they could have done something and maybe gotten a little bit further. But this guy's a master of what he's doing. And Chase, I agree with you. I had the same thing. He's probably won most of the arguments he's ever been in. He just doesn't know the rules. That's what I always say. If you get arrested, get a lawyer, because you don't know the rules. And you can't argue if you don't know how to play the game. What's interesting, though, is with his throat unprotected, he starts to show clusters, which is what we look for, of behavior that indicates something is changing. One is that nervous head bob, and he starts and stops sentences, what I call cadence deviations. As he's going through, he'll stop, hesitate, and create new details. That nervous laugh and that crossing the abdomen are his insecurity moments. You're going to see it over and over and over. So he's protecting his vital organs. And you'll even see him adapting a little bit, meaning release nervous energy with his hands as this thing comes up. You could tell, though, he thinks and then he redirects. He's trying to get him off topic at every turn when he talks about something other than the topic they're asking about. When he says it's supposed to be, he's distancing as he makes up how much money there's supposed to be there, and his voice lilts up at $350. Look, that's not in his pattern. I would go, hold on a minute. What do you mean? What do you mean it's supposed to be? When he starts to talk about money, his hands roll into him. Don't know that means anything specific, but I would like to know what it means. Because when something that changes that dramatically, there's something going on in somebody's head to cause them to do it. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, well, on that point, yes, we get these broken lines there. What I mean by broken lines is if you've got a strong line of energy, it means you can actually hold stuff. You can defend yourself. Like, your hands work much better if joints are straightened out a little bit. The moment all the joints start to break, then you can't do all the things your hands are meant to do. And so we've got this gesture here in at the stomach area, which means certainly he's under a lot of stress at that point because his joints aren't functioning as they should function. He's very unsure, let's say, of what he's saying there. So let's go to the start of this. A friend, and he gestures right off, as Greg, you've been saying, out of frame. It's a really big gesture there, a really big, like, let's just move this along. Let's avoid that. So a real kind of redirect on that one there. I don't want to say his name, and there's a surrender gesture, and then it's very indirect at the same time. A direct surrender gesture would be, I'm not saying his name, not going to tell you, okay? An indirect one is, I'm not going to say that name. It's rather